Hey! Who are you? What are you arresting me for? In the evening, Luo Hong, who was walking home, was grabbed by a middle-aged man who suddenly appeared around the corner and dragged him into the alley next to him. Big brother, if you have something to say, I still have 300, you can take it all. Luo Hong was frightened by this guy who was 2 meters tall and had a big waist and a big waist. Overkill. However, this big man seems to have not heard Luo Hong's words, and still drags him forward. Luo Hong is anxious. Where are you dragging yourself? Brother, I still have a bank card here, and I also have 1,800 in it. Don't think it's too small, this is all my net worth. If you rob money, you will rob money, don't come up with any other ideas. The big man didn't speak all the way. Luo Hong was really anxious, he wasn't like a thief who robbed money. So he began to struggle hard, but in the end it was all in vain. This big man is too strong. Hey, auntie, call the police for me. Luo Hong shouted loudly when he saw a fat old lady passing by. But the fat old lady walked away as if she didn't hear it. Has the world gotten to this point? Luo Hong's eyes widened. You should take a look this way. Don't waste your energy, no one can see you now. The big man finally spoke, his voice was low and gloomy, making people shudder. Luo Hong was startled by the voice and said, What did you say? She can't see me. Could this guy be a ghost? I'm dead? Don't think about it, you are not dead, and I didn't arrest you to go to hell. The big man seemed to have guessed Luo Hong's thoughts and said. Then what's the situation? Luo Hong was a little confused. Just now, a neighbor who was a policeman passed by without looking up at Luo Hong. Now he believed the big man's words, but what are you trying to do? You'll know when the time comes. After the big man said another sentence, he stopped talking about Luo Hong. Arrive. Luo Hong, who was dragged by the big man, saw the place where he stopped. It was an ordinary coffee shop. Why did he ask himself to come here? Luo Hong, who was still preparing to ask questions in doubt, was suddenly pushed by the big man and crashed into the cafe. What's happening here? The room that should have been the cafe was pitch dark, and most importantly, Luo Hongneng could clearly feel that he was falling down, and there was even the sound of wind in his ears. Your uncle, what are you doing? Luo Hong rolled in the void, and the only light-filled door was slowly closed. Bang! Luo Hong heard a loud noise, his consciousness gradually blurred, and he passed out. Boss, are you really quitting? In an office, sitting in front of the desk was a middle-aged man with a pot belly. At this time, he was carrying a travel bag and a large backpack behind him, looking like he was going to travel far. The middle-aged man heard the words of another young man wearing a black baseball cap, and replied, Xinqiang, it's not that I don't want to do it, it's that I can't do it anymore. You know, the sales of our newspaper these few issues, alas. Speaking, the middle-aged man ended his words with a sigh. But, the little boss. Xinqiang looked at the middle-aged man's luggage. You took all the valuables, what should the little boss do? The middle-aged man said sternly, Isn't this left him with such a large office and a villa at home, so he can starve to death? Don't talk about it, I'm leaving first, you guys should go to find a job earlier. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he squeezed past Xinqiang and walked straight out of the gate. Alas, what is this? He left by himself and left a 17 or 18-year-old child in such a dangerous Chambord archipelago. Xinqiang looked at the figure of the fat boss who had gone away, and shook his head. He should find another job. After 2 years of working in the newspaper office, he still felt a little reluctant. Little boss, wake up. In the dimness, Luo Hong heard a shout in his ear, Little boss? Who is this calling? It hurts so much to fall. That big guy made such trouble just for throwing himself so badly, but unfortunately he couldn't get it off, or he would have to find someone to beat him up after he went back. That big guy is so weird, he can make others invisible to him, let's move after he goes back, can't he hide if he can't provoke me? Little boss, you're awake. The voice in Luo Hong's ear became joyful. Are you still calling? Luo Hong opened his eyes diligently, and a blond man with a high nose bridge appeared in Luo Hong's sight. Why did it throw a foreigner out of it? Who are you? This guy can't understand Chinese, can he? Did you see yourself falling and kindly help me? Luo Hong was afraid that this person didn't understand everyone, but the blond man spoke fluently. Little boss, I'm Ibuki. What's wrong with you? Ibuki was very surprised by the little boss's reaction. You come to the newspaper every day, how could you not know me? Xinqiang, come and see, what's wrong with the little boss? Ibuki called to Xinqiang, who was still standing at the door. The little boss is awake. Xinqiang turned his head and walked over. Wake up is awake, but he doesn't seem to know me anymore. Ibuki said worriedly. Xinqiang frowned, squatted down, touched Luo Hong's forehead leaning against the chair, and said, I don't have a fever, didn't I just touch my head, why did I lose my memory? What are these two guys doing? Doing a sitcom? Luo Hong patted Xinqiang's extended hand and said, Hey, stop acting, I'm going back, you can play by yourself. After finishing speaking, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com was about to stand up and leave what looked like an office, but as soon as Luo Hong's feet stood up straight, his thighs felt sore for a while, and he fell back on the chair. Little boss, don't be discouraged. Although the newspaper is bankrupt, don't be too sad. Xinqiang knew that his little boss loved the newspaper, and it was understandable that he could not accept the bankruptcy of the newspaper. What are you talking about? And why are my legs so sore? Didn't I just fall? Luo Hong was very puzzled that he couldn't even stand at this level. You have been chased by debt collectors for 3 streets, and it is normal for your leg to be sore. Xinqiang said embarrassedly, but the boss has already sold the shares of the coating factory and paid back the money. In the future, you will take this office if you rent it out, you can still live in Chambord. Shampoo? What is this place? You not only act in sitcoms, but also bring costs one piece? Little boss, let's tidy things up first, you can rest for a while. Xinqiang didn't know what happened to this little boss, and he couldn't control it anyway, so he should clean up his things honestly and leave. Luo Hong looked at the two who turned and walked to the other desk to sort out their things, frowned and said, What is going on? Luo Hong, who couldn't stand up, was also bored, so he picked up a newspaper on the table and read it. The captain of the 9 snake pirates, Boya Hankook, joins the Sea of Kibu. This Shampoo Land. 9 snakes? Queen. The shocked Luo Hong leaned towards the window, sure enough. Standing outside is a huge giant tree. This is the world of One Piece. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. You guys, what are you doing? Luo Hong, who had reacted, asked Shingo and Ibuki, who were packing their things. The two turned around and said to Luo Hong, who was questioning, didn't the newspaper office dissolve, so we had to go out and look for a new job. Little boss, we have to see fate in the future when we meet, haha. The two were quite optimistic. Although they lost their jobs, they still laughed in the room. Luo Hong can't figure out the situation now, what kind of identity did he transcend into? Men definitely don't need to question, Luo Hong can feel this himself. However, the appearance is temporarily invisible. Judging by the reaction of the two, it should be a soul-wearing. The important thing now is to figure out what you are doing. Ahem, I'm a little confused right now, who owns this newspaper? Luo Hong thought for a while, and then asked. Xinqiang was a little surprised. Why did this little boss lose his memory after a fall? Little boss, you won't be confused, right? At this time, your father's newspaper office, but now it's disbanded, and your father also ran out to travel. In the future, there will be no such shampoo office. Speaking of which, Xinqiang is still a little disappointed. After all, he has been working as an intern, and he still has feelings for the Shamboard newspaper. What does this mean? Dad running away? Newspapers dissolved? Is it a difficult start from the start? Also, isn't this the world of One Piece? Why did you give me the identity of a newspaper boss? Just bring me any naval pirate. Luo Hong was speechless to the big man who threw him in. Have you ever seen One Piece get the world background wrong? That. Dong dong. As soon as Luo Hong opened his mouth, he was interrupted by 2 knocks on the door. Luo Hong followed the voice and saw a middle-aged man with white hair was standing in front of the door, looking inside. Who is Luo Hong? Calls me? When Luo Hong heard the shout, he responded, I am, what's the matter? Could it be that there was a task as soon as he came up? Main story or side story? Are you Luo Hong? The man walked in, looked around, and continued, your father has already sold this shop to me. At this time, you can take a look at the deed. What's the situation? Xinqiang and Ibuki were both stunned. Didn't the boss say that he had paid off the debt and wanted to leave the shop to Luo Hong to rent out? Why is this sold? Did you make a mistake? Xinqiang asked. Did you make a mistake? The man looked at the house deed in his hand, and then at Luo Hong, and said, it's here, his name is Luo Hong too, that's right. What's going on here? When you just came here, you have nothing left. Are you not even ready to give it a chance? Little boss. Xinqiang didn't expect such a situation, the boss is too unreasonable, he didn't even leave a shop for Luo Hong, no wonder he had to run away in a hurry, it turned out to be such a thing. But even if he wasn't his own son, he didn't need to be so cruel. Xinqiang feels sorry for Luo Hong. Apart from helping in the newspaper office, Luo Hong really knows nothing. It will be difficult if he wants to live on his own words and shampoo in the future. However, as long as the villa left by the boss is not sold, Luo Hong rents it out and rents a smaller house by himself, and he can still live on, but this is no longer something Xinqiang can manage. There are so many things I haven't moved yet. Then I'll come back in 2 days. Remember to move them. The man was better at talking, and gave Luo Hong 2 days to move things. The man who said that, without any other nonsense, turned around and left. Does the little boss need us to help you move things back to the villa? Ibuki looked at Luo Hong's small body and asked him. This situation is a bit complicated. This villa won't be sold, right? Luo Hong made such a terrifying reversal. At that time, he would really be a pirate king from zero, and he was still in Shamboard, where is the opportunity? People like Rayleigh are not necessarily easy to talk about. Probably, it won't. Xinqiang wasn't too sure, the office was all sold, and the villa really didn't say it would never be sold. Then, let's go and have a look first. Luo Hong couldn't find the place, and it would be impossible without these 2 people to lead the way. Xinqiang didn't refuse, and said, okay, let's help the little boss carry some things. At this time, Luo Hong's legs were much better, and he was barely able to stand up, but it would be a bit reluctant to take things. So Shingo and Ibuki didn't let him move things, they each carried a box and walked to the little boss's house with Luo Hong. The villa is in a villa area, there are no messy people, it is a relatively good location on the Shamboard. This was bought by the previous owner after many years of hard work. Not bad. Luo Hong nodded in satisfaction when he saw the Threstere villa in front of him. I just don't know if it will be my own in the future. Little boss, try the key to open it. Xinqiang reminded Luo Hong. Luo Hong took out a key from his body. Luo Hong used the key to twist on the door, crack. It really opened. It's okay, and it hasn't been sold yet. Let's go. Luo Hong said to Shingo and Ibuki behind him, and then walked in first. After entering, the two put the wooden box in the corner, and then looked around curiously. In fact, they knew that they were here, and had never been there before. After all, it was a wealthy area, and it was rare for commoners like them to see this kind of villa. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. It's much bigger than the house I rented. Ibuki said in admiration that he would be able to get such a big house anytime. Come and live here if you like it. Anyway, Luo Hong didn't feel bad about it because he picked it up. Ibuki touched his head, but didn't speak. Now that he is not a newspaper employee, and Luo Hong was not a buddy before, it is impossible to live here. What did the newspaper office do before? Luo Hong wanted to know more, and asked the two of them after sitting down. You all sit too. Luo Hong pointed to the empty chair next to him. Yiran looked like a master. The two sat down, and Xinqiang said first, we are reporting the daily activities and news happening in Chambord, and we will also report any big news in the world. That's it. No wonder it is going bankrupt. What kind of thing is this? Shampooland can still be reported by a newspaper? It's lucky to live so many years. Do you want to start with this newspaper and make some money to buy a devil fruit for self-defense? This one piece is not a peaceful place. People will die casually. Maybe if the strong person doesn't pay attention, a piece of people will be wiped out. It's not realistic to find a devil fruit or something in Shampooland, and I'm a person who has a sore back and weak legs after running a few streets, so I can't do such a thing. And looking at the news of Hancock, it should be more than 10 years before Luffy left the sea, and it is impossible to sneak into the LU spaceship to save his life. Therefore, now I can only rely on myself, and the two former employees in front of me. I have to leave them first, otherwise the newspaper will go on alone. You guys, are you planning to go to work elsewhere? Luo Hong asked tentatively. Xinqiang squeezed out a smile and said, now that the newspaper office is closed, we have to go out to find work. Have you thought about continuing? Luo Hong expressed his thoughts. Continue to work? Isn't the newspaper office closed? Ibuki was puzzled. The newspaper office was gone, so how could he continue? Cough cough. Luo Hong coughed twice, and said, your boss ran away, why don't you still have me? We can continue to do it. Those printing factories, sales channels, etc., can we still contact you? The other two felt incredible when they heard Luo Hong's words, and Xinqiang even said, we used to have 7 or 8 people in the newspaper office, but now it's just the two of us, including the little boss, there are only 3 people, it's difficult to keep going. Ah! Xinqiang was telling the truth, how could they be so busy with just 3 people, going out for interviews, writing articles, and typesetting? The most important thing is that now there is no money, and no salary is available. Is it for nothing? Well, we can adjust the direction of the company. We don't have to write about Chambord. We can publish novels that only need to move our heads. This means we don't have to go out and run. Luo Hong also knew that the 3 of them really wanted to do it. The newspaper office is very difficult, but turning the newspaper office into a novel magazine should not be a big problem. Xinqiang was taken aback for a moment, changed direction. Don't you want to be a newspaper office? Wouldn't it be worse not to be a newspaper office? The 3 of us only know this business. Luo Hong knew that the 2 of them would be wrong, and now he only has these 2 initial partners, but he can't lose them, and quickly corrected, no, I didn't say that I won't be a newspaper, but let the newspaper change its development direction. For example, only publishing novels, what do you think? Fiction. We're not a newspaper office, so how did we come up with novels? Does the newspaper still publish novels? Why can't the newspaper office publish novels? Even if we didn't have it before, we can open up a new path. I am a liberal arts student, so I can only do this. Is it possible to come to this world to play geography and history? Turn around, the two sides are completely different, okay? When you make money, your wages will definitely double. This. The two were a little hesitant. If it was the former boss, they might have agreed. Anyway, the former boss was rich, and even if he messed up, he would get paid. Now this little boss, but this villa is left. Seeing that the two of them were still hesitating, Luo Hong said, "Don't worry, even if you don't make any money in the future, I will pay you wages after selling this villa." Luo Hong was still very relieved about the novel from the previous world, conquering a Chambord people. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Even if you lose, you'll just lose all your initial equipment, and you'll be a hustler at the bottom. When Luffy arrives at Chambord, you'll be able to turn over even if you coax and deceive the last boat. Seeing Luo Hong's determination, the two looked at each other, and they still didn't want to leave if they could leave here and take a strange place. Then, let's try again. The two nodded and said in unison. Haha, it's done, the rest is to fight. Are we weekly or daily? Weekly newspapers, the cost of daily newspapers is too high, and there are not so many things to report in Chambord. Xinqiang said to Luo Hong. That's good. If it's a daily newspaper, you'll be exhausted to death. Then when is our next issue? Luo Hong intends to use the name of the previous newspaper. Even if the past is miserable, it will be a bit of regular readers. The first wave will not worry about not being able to sell. Just 2 days later. Xinqiang replied. Is it just 2 days? The time is a little tight. After all, the newspaper is still so big, and I can only use handwriting to get here, and the speed is much slower. These 2 days, I have to work hard. Then hurry up, how about you two just live here first? It's just a temporary office, anyway, the former office has been sold. Shingo was non-committal, but Ibuki was very enthusiastic and said hurriedly, okay. Seeing that Ibuki agreed, Shingo didn't like to refuse, so he could only say, okay. Then contact the printer quickly, and don't publish it when you call. Luo Hong instructed the two of Xinqiang. Xinqiang nodded and agreed with Luo Hong, but where can I get this novel? We don't know anyone who writes novels, and it's not common, right? Where can I find it? Isn't it ready-made here? Luo Hong patted his chest and said. Shingo and Ibuki were both stunned. What kind of novel would the little boss write? How do we not know? In the past 2 years, they have seen the little boss helping in the newspaper office, but they really don't know about other talents. What? Don't believe it. Luo Hong said, seeing the doubts of the two. Well, the two of them don't know what to say. Now Luo Hong is the boss of the two of them, and they can count on Luo Hong's salary in the future. The letter is a letter, but I didn't see you write it. I still don't believe it. Luo Hong has seen it, and the two are still worried about themselves. You guys go back to get your luggage first. When you arrive, I'll show you the test draft first, and then you'll know my strength. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Luo Hong said nothing else, and said directly to the two of them. It's okay for the two to think about it, but they will consider other things when they look at the draft first. Even if the little boss didn't write it down when it went down, the two of you would just go out and get some materials tomorrow. Alright, then, let's go first, boss. The two stood up and prepared to go back to stay in Luo Hong's villa. Well, go ahead and watch my masterpiece tomorrow. Luo Hong also stood up and saw them off. After Shingo and Ibuki left, Luo Hong returned to the living room and thought about what to write about his first work. Pirates of the Caribbean. Luo Hong thought for a while, and then immediately rejected it. In a place with a naval base, writing a book about pirates isn't courting death. Luo Hong didn't forget that there was a naval base in Chambord, and the general was here in minutes. Then write about the navy. No, there are quite a few pirates in Chambord, but the navy didn't find fault with them, so the pirates came up to kick the pavilion first. Then you can only increase your popularity first. Once you have popularity, talk to the navy and protect your own safety before you can write about the navy. The first book should not be too frustrating, it must be an instant hit, and there is no need to write any wild novels. Luo Hong thought about it carefully, or try it with the 4 famous novels. The Red Mansion is definitely not good, you can't understand it yourself, so don't let the people in the world of One Piece understand it at this level of knowledge. Forget about the ghosts and ghosts of Journey to the West, I'm afraid I can't accept it. Water Margin is no different from writing pirates, so it can only be the 3 kingdoms. With the navy on one side, the 4 emperors on the other, and the Kaiwahei on the other, the 3 party forces, isn't that the case? UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Actually, Luo Hong originally wanted to add Song Ming Jun, but after thinking about it, forget it. Don't look at the monk's face and look at the Buddha's face. It's not far from the naval base. It's better to be stable. Even though the Kaiwahei has not been assembled yet, it does not hinder the policy of the navy. He did what he said. As the home of a newspaper owner, Luo Hong easily found a pen and paper in the room. For Luo Hong, who is used to computer code, handwriting still has certain challenges. Fortunately, the newspaper that Luo Hong read when he came was full of Chinese characters. If it was Japanese, it would be a miserable situation. It would take a few months to learn every word. Since they want to raise the navy, then it is way, big enough and strong enough. In the future, there will be a red dog in power, but it will be Sui, who will rule the world. It is estimated that this guy will be happy to write this. Of course, the 4 emperors are Shu Na, the strength of a single soldier can't be said. Chi Wahei can barely be counted as Wu, just as a foil. After dividing the forces, Yu Xian started to write. In the early stage, the prototype of Roger could be Dong Zhou, but after changing his character and actions, the rest of the world can be heard, and the one with great power can stay. Then let the unparalleled Admiral Garp catch him and finish. Forward, decades ago, Han, the kingdom that unified the entire sea, smashed the capital of Han due to the rise of the great pirate Roger, causing the country to turmoil and ruining life. The story begins when Roger occupied the capital of Han. Luo Hong just put on the lights and wrote in the living room for one night. Dong dong. Luo Hong, who was still in high spirits, heard the knock on the door and looked out the window, and it was already bright. I actually wrote it all night, and it's enough, but it's quite interesting that the 3 kingdoms can be written like this. Luo Hong looked at the manuscript he wrote and nodded with satisfaction. Putting down the pen, Luo Hong stood up and walked towards the door. Xinqiang, good morning. Opening the door, it was Xinqiang who was standing in front of the door carrying 2 large packages. Luo Hong turned sideways and let Xinqiang, who was carrying heavy objects, in, then followed the door around the door. When will Obuki arrive? Luo Hong asked after helping Xinqiang put a package. Xinqiang put the rest of the package away, sat on the sofa, and said, I have this one from Ibuki. I met him at the intersection just now, and he said he'd better go out to interview something. I'm afraid it will be too late. I still don't believe in myself. But it's not bad for employees to know that they are distracted by their boss, at least they are not here to eat. Leaving 2 people behind is absolutely right. If he wants an interview, let him go. You can read this one I wrote first. Luo Hong took a few pages of the manuscript on the coffee table and handed it to Xinqiang. Did the boss really write it down? Xinqiang looked at Luo Hong in disbelief. He didn't expect that the original little boss still kept this hand, but why didn't he show it when he was going to go bankrupt? Hey, it's better to leave this kind of thing about their father and son alone. Even if Xinqiang was killed, he would never have thought that the little boss in front of him had already been occupied by another person from the world. Of course that person from the past could not write novels. Is it about the navy and pirates? Shingo said, looking at the preface written by Luo Hong. Well, let's see if it suits Chambord's taste first. Luo Hong didn't know if the people in the One Piece world would like novels. So Luo Hong first asked Shingo and Ibuki to try it out. If it works, use it. If it doesn't work, it can only be changed. Otherwise, it won't work if you like it. And Lieutenant General Roger and Garp. The more Xinqiang looked, the more fascinated he became. The whole person held up the manuscript with his eyes on it. What's the name of the boss's book? What do you think of the Great Voyage Age? Luo Hong thought about it and said. I'll see it. Xinqiang said without raising his head. It seems not bad, at least it can attract people. Luo Hong looked at Xinqiang's state and nodded slightly. His whole night's hard work was not in vain. After a while, Xinqiang finished reading the manuscript that Luo Hong had written overnight. Gently put the manuscript back on the coffee table, Xinqiang smiled and said, the boss is so talented, it is much better than me who wrote the manuscript. Xinqiang is not a compliment, this is his real thought after reading this manuscript. Haha, so. Luo Hong smiled, but he also knew that although the text was written by himself, the originality came from the Three Kingdoms, so he couldn't boast. After laughing, Luo Hong asked Xinqiang, what did the printing factory that asked you to contact say? Speaking of the printing factory, Xinqiang's smile disappeared instantly. Boss, I'm sorry, I didn't complete your task. The boss of the printing factory said that none of us have no money, not even an office space, and he is unwilling to print it for us on credit. Ah! Luo Hong was stunned. He didn't even have a printing factory. No matter how well written it was useless. But boss, there are 2 more in Chambord. I'll check it out again today. They're all very good with the former boss, so they shouldn't refuse. Xinqiang still has hope. What about mortgage? Although Xinqiang is reluctant to see this scene, the boss wrote really well, and there is something worth fighting for. I won't refuse because of the money. Although Luo Hong was not optimistic about the remaining 2, he could not give it a try, so he had to say, I'll go with you later. Okay, boss. Xinqiang didn't object. The boss may have a higher success rate. After all, he may look at the thin noodles in the past. Have you eaten yet? After talking for a long time, Luo Hongke felt that his stomach was going flat, and he hadn't eaten all night, so it was not easy to survive until now. I've eaten it. Xinqiang had already eaten breakfast on the street on the way here. Luo Hong nodded and said, I've been hungry all night. You sit down for a while, and I'll get something to eat. Well, okay, boss. I'll typeset your novel first. Xinqiang replied Road. It is true that he is not good at typesetting. Luo Hong smiled at Yu Xian, turned and walked towards the kitchen. Hey, luckily the old guy didn't empty the kitchen. Luo Hong looked in the kitchen, the pots and pans were still available, and there was still some food in the cupboard, at least he couldn't starve himself today. While cooking, Luo Hong thought about his future plans. If the newspaper office can really become popular again in Champu, then recruit more people and make it a big company. In the future, if there is a chance to collect 100 million Baileys, it is not bad to go to the auction house to buy a devil fruit. The One Piece world is not as good as the previous society ruled by law. People here may stomp their own farts by stomping their feet. It is really dangerous to not get something to protect themselves. Especially in this mixed shampoo place, the pirate navy, kidnapping and extortion are everywhere. The thunder fruit on the empty island is also good, but I just can't find a place, so I guess it's too late. But now, there is no difference between going like this and courting death. In matters at sea, a pirate with 1,000,000 bounty can chase him everywhere. Alas, still not strong enough. Even in the world of One Piece, you can't swim for a while. Now, let's honestly open our own newspaper. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Xinqiang, let's go. After eating and drinking, Luo Hong came to the living room and said to Xinqiang, who was still sitting and typesetting the novel. Hearing Luo Hong's words, Xinqiang also stood up and followed out of the gate of the villa. Luo Hong's villa is located between the 60th tree and the 59th tree, which is very close to the naval station. The printing factory is in the 48th tree. The journey is a bit far and it takes a lot of time. Yesterday, because he was new here, Luo Hong was not able to take a good look at the surrounding and the environment. Now that he has calmed down, he has the mind to look at the shampoo field full of bubbles and trees. Sure enough, it's like a fairy tale. If it wasn't in a world like One Piece, this place would definitely be a tourist destination or something. NOS 40 to 59 are relatively safe compared to number 1 to number 29 in the Nanisha zone. Luo Hong walked along the way, and some of the few pirates and businessmen who came to find coding craftsmen were still relatively law-abiding. It may also be related to the relatively strong navy in this era. After all, it has only been 10 years since One Piece Fuzhou and O'Hara's Demon Slayer order. Although One Piece's treasure is extremely attractive, making the number of pirates soar, but in the control area of the navy, the pirates do not dare to be too arrogant. Boss, here we are. While Luo Hong was still looking at the surrounding scenery, Xinqiang stopped and pointed to a small factory in front of him. Luo Hong regained his senses and said, "Oh? Are you all there yet?" After speaking, Luo Hong looked in the direction Xinqiang pointed. The printing factory was not big, it could even be said to be a little small, and the gap between the printing factory and Luo Hong's expectation was still quite large. Why is it so big? Luo Hong's words revealed full of disappointment. Didn't you already know that this printing factory was only this big? Xinqiang thought inexplicably that boss Luo Hong came here to play a few times when he was a child. Moreover, the demand for newspapers in the world of One Piece is actually not high. The newspapers that can really make money are the big newspapers with newspaper delivery birds, which can be sold to the whole world. A local newspaper like Luo Hong does not need such a large printing house. Boss, it's not too small. It won't take long for the newspapers of our newspaper to be printed. Xinqiang said to Luo Hong. Luo Hong didn't take it seriously, and said, "It really doesn't need to be big now, but you have to think about us, we will definitely become a big newspaper in the future. Don't limit your vision to such a small one. But now, it's enough, let's take a look first." Look. In the end, Luo Hong still walked in. There was nothing he could do. Now that he had no money, he could only find a familiar person to give him credit first. "Yo, it's Xinqiang." The gatekeeper seemed to know Xinqiang and greeted him directly. "Well, Hachiko, our little boss is coming to discuss something," Xinqiang said to the white-bearded old man guarding the gate. When Hachiko heard that Luo Hong was coming, he turned his head to look at the door, and sure enough Luo Hong was standing there. "Luo Hong, I haven't seen you here for a long time." "Well, I'm a little busy." Luo Hong didn't know what to call him, so he had to hesitate. "Then you can go in." Hachiko nodded to Luo Hong and put the two in. Although Luo Hong didn't know the way, luckily there was Xinqiang. Following behind him, the two came to the office of the printing factory owner. Dong dong. Xinqiang knocked twice at the door. "Come in." A deep voice came from the room. Crack. Xinqiang pushed open the door, and the two walked in just like that. Sitting in the middle of the room was a middle-aged man who looked in his 40s or 50s. "Oh? It's Luo Hong, why do you remember that I was playing here?" The man looked at Luo Hong who came in, smiled and said, "Boss Hans, our little boss is here to discuss with you about printing." It was Xinqiang who helped Luo Hong to call out his name. This was what Luo Hong had discussed with Xinqiang before he came, and he was afraid that he would not be able to call him by then. "What is the name of an acquaintance?" "Printing? Isn't Luo Meng not working as a newspaper office? What else do you want to print?" Hans expressed his confusion. The newspaper office was gone. At this time, Luo Hong also spoke, "Uncle Hans, we plan to continue the newspaper office." "You guys? Didn't your father quit?" Hans still didn't understand the situation and asked. Luo Hong didn't know how to explain it. The father of this identity did sell the office, and the news probably spread in this business. He left. "I plan to continue, but I plan to transform the newspaper, so I came to find Uncle Hans is discussing the printing. If you want to print, you can, just use the previous price." Hans didn't intend to shave off Luo Hong's body, after all, he was a boy who grew up watching him. Speaking of money, Luo Hong was embarrassed. "Well, we have no money now." As soon as these words were said, there was no sound in the whole room. Hans looked at Luo Hong looked at Hans, and the two looked at each other. Seeing that the two of them stopped talking, Xinqiang had no choice but to say, "Boss Hans, the transformation of the small boss will definitely be successful. I think what he wrote will definitely be popular." Xinqiang looked at Luo Hong after the novel. He became a loyal fan of Luo Hong. Why can't he speak for his idol at this time? Hans frowned and thought for a while, and finally said, "For the sake of old Roman, I can print one issue for you first, but before the next issue is printed, I have to pay." Seeing that Hans was relieved, Luo Hong finally smiled. He didn't come out for a run in vain. "Thank you, Uncle Hans. Don't worry, I'll bring you the money first." Hans nodded and said, "I hope you can make money." After the agreement, Luo Hong didn't plan to stay any longer. It's not good to fool around in front of creditors. "Then Uncle Hans, let's go first. We're still working on the typesetting. We'll bring it to you when it's done." "Well, let's go." Hans waved his hand, saying goodbye to Luo Hong. "Hey, Xinqiang, thanks anyway." Luo Hong, who returned to the corridor, put his arms around Xinqiang's shoulder and said. Xinqiang smiled and said, "There is still a good relationship between Boss Roman and you and Boss Hans. Otherwise, you might be rejected like the one I found yesterday." The two of them were about to walk out of the corridor, but a person walked by in front of them, listening to the two of them again. "Yo, isn't this the little boss of the Chambord newspaper? Why did he come to Hans's printing house? Did he come to be an apprentice? Who is this, mocking him as soon as he comes out?" Luo Hong looked intently. The other party was about the same height as Luo Hong, with blue hair and the corners of his mouth curled up. He was looking at Luo Hong with disdain. "Who is this?" Luo Hong asked Xinqiang in a low voice. Could it be the former enemy of this identity? UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. He is the creditor who found someone to chase after you for a few streets. The president of another newspaper in Chambord, but the money has been paid off, so he doesn't dare to trouble us. Xinqiang introduced to Luo Hong. It turned out to be the guy who caused him to suffer from back pain when he came here. Luo Hong looked at the guy dissatisfied, and said, "What's the matter with you when you're not an apprentice? Take care of your own newspaper, maybe it will close that day." "You." The blue-haired man was about to scold Luo Hong, but Luo Hong didn't give him the chance and walked directly to the gate with Xinqiang. "Humph, if you are acquainted, your father has run away. I see how you are still hanging around in the shampoo field." The man who had nowhere to vent stomped his feet and said, "What kind of newspaper is this guy?" Luo Hong asked Xinqiang next to him after leaving the factory. Xinqiang explained to Luo Hong, there are only 2 local newspapers in Chambord, one is our shampoo newspaper, and the other is their Bubble Island newspaper. They have been waiting for us to go out of business, and they pushed the boss without finding a chance. In one fell swoop, our newspaper office went bankrupt. It turned out to be the case, competition, but now that I'm here, it's not a matter of minutes to abuse him. Xinqiang, look at it, it won't be long before we buy his Bubble Island newspaper. Luo Hong patted Xinqiang on the shoulder and cheered. Yesterday, Xinqiang couldn't believe Luo Hong's words, but after reading the novels written by Luo Hong in the morning, Xinqiang was still looking forward to it. In Xinqiang's expectation, the fire of the Great Voyage Age is definitely not a problem. Xinqiang has never seen this topic before. This time the little boss can write it, and it will definitely make waves in the newspapers on the entire voyage. I believe in the little boss. Xinqiang smiled at Luo Hong. Luo Hong nodded, very satisfied with his subordinate. Let's go back first, Ibuki won't be able to enter the house when he comes back. Luo Hong remembered Ibuki who was still interviewing outside. When Luo Hong said this, Xinqiang also remembered that the 3 of them were living together now, and Luo Hong had not gone to get the backup key, and neither Xinqiang nor Ibuki could open his villa. The 2 walked quickly to the house. Fortunately, Ibuki didn't wait at the door of the house, so it wouldn't make him unable to return home. Little boss, have you ever been out? Said that Cao and Cao had arrived, Luo Hong had just opened the door of the villa, and Ibuki rushed over. Seeing Ibuki coming back in time, Xinqiang smiled and said, you really know how to pinch time. What pinch time? Ibuki was a little confused about the situation. Didn't he say I'd go for an interview, what time is not available? Luo Hong interrupted Shingo, who was still making fun of Ibuki, and said, go ahead, Ibuki, what did you interview? Luo Hong asked him when he saw a large notebook in Ibuki's hand. After entering the house, Ibuki raised his notebook and said, I have a big news interview today. Oh? What big news? Shingo knew that Ibuki would not speak big words easily, and now he is talking about interviews. When it comes to big news, something big must have happened. Just now I went to the bar on the 21st, you don't know, those pirates who came back from the New World said that the 2 big pirates of the New World, Moonlight Mariah and Beasts Kaido, are going to fight. But it's big news, I don't know if the people at Bubble Island News know this news. Ibuki danced and talked about the news he got from the bar, and seemed to be very excited about the 2 big pirates about to get together. Did the battle between Mariah and Kaido start at this time? This is really big news. That kid Moria will definitely lose. Do you want to do something in the newspaper? When Moria loses, these pirates still don't say they have foresight. But think about it, forget it. Now that you don't have the ability to protect yourself at all, first get the title of prophet. Isn't that courting death? Just rush up to a pirate to tell your fortune, if you know it well, just fool around. If you don't know it, you will only be beaten. Tossing the unrealistic things in his mind, Luo Hong said to Ibuki, don't worry about whether Bubble Island News knows it or not, this news will be published in the newspaper the day after tomorrow. On the front page, it is equal to the age of navigation. The age of navigation? What is that? Ibuki asked suspiciously, not knowing the name of the novel written by Luo Hong. Xinqiang picked up the manuscript on the coffee table and said, little boss, it's time to call him boss. Look at the name of the novel that boss wrote last night. Seeing that Xinqiang still attached great importance to the manuscript, Ibuki took it. What novel can stand up to the confrontation of the super pirates? Also divided into half the page of the home page? Ibuki, who took over the manuscript, sat down on the sofa and looked at it. Just when Ibuki started to read the novel he adapted, Luo Hong felt a little sleepy, but he didn't sleep all night. Moreover, I went out to public relations early in the morning, and after walking such a long distance, Now that I got home, sleepiness rushed to my head. No way, I have to go to bed for a while. Xinqiang, after Ibuki has finished reading, you continue to type. If I don't wake up by then, you can take it directly to Uncle Hans's printing house. When Luo Hong went to bed, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com has not forgotten to remind Xia Xinqiang, this is the capital of the rise, don't screw it up. Don't worry, boss. I'll fix it. In the past 2 days, Luo Hong saw that Xinqiang was much more stable than Ibuki, so Luo Hong still felt relieved to hand over the matter to Xinqiang. Hey, it's been 2 days since I came to this world, I can finally get a good night's sleep. I don't know if I can go back to the original world. My parents don't know if they are looking for themselves everywhere, and thinking about it, Luo Hong narrowed his eyes and fell asleep. You are Luo Hong? How come my prototype is Dong Zhou? Roger? Luo Hong looked at the guy in front of him, isn't this the Pirate King Roger? Wait, how did he know about Dong Zhou? Hey, what's in your hand? 3 kingdoms? What's happening here? Crossed again? What is this else? This, that, Your Excellency, One Piece, I didn't write it like Dong Zhou. It's just a prototype, but I wrote you very positively. Luo Hong, who couldn't figure out the situation, still prepared to stabilize the situation first. It depends on the situation. Humph. This Roger didn't say much, the other hand holding the long knife directly slashed towards Luo Hong. Don't be so direct. When the fight is agreed, the chat stream can wait to come to the rescue. Boss, boss. Just as the long knife was about to fall on Luo Hong's neck, a familiar voice faintly heard in Luo Hong's ears. Xinqiang? Luo Hong was shocked and sat up. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. Phew, Luo Hong sighed when he saw Xinqiang standing beside the bed. Well, it's a dream. Xinqiang, is there something wrong? Lifting the thin quilt on his body, Luo Hong got off the bed. When I was sleeping, I was so tired that I didn't even have time to take off my clothes, but now it's okay, saving the time to put on clothes. Xinqiang touched his head, smiled and said, the newspaper will be on sale later, so I'll call you boss. It's going to be released? Don't you want to talk about the day after tomorrow? Luo Hong was stunned. Could it be that the time has come earlier? Boss, you've slept all day. Xinqiang said awkwardly. Have I slept all day? Cough, cough, Luo Hong coughed twice, then said, what, how long? 1 hour left. Xinqiang thought about it and said. That's all right, let's eat first, I'm too hungry now. Xinqiang didn't say that he slept all day, but Luo Hong felt that his stomach had shrunk. Xinqiang gave way and said, Ibuki has already cooked, you can just go out to eat. Oh? Ibuki can still cook. Luo Hong looked at Ibuki, he was not a person who could do housework at all, he was white and tender. Yes, the skin looks like a woman. Ibuki has a lot of research on cooking. In the past, when the newspaper company had dinner parties, he was asked to cook. Speaking of Ibuki's cooking skills, even Shingo gave a thumbs up. Goo. An embarrassing voice sounded, and Xinqiang laughed silently. At this time, he was called Luo Hong and touched his head, don't talk, I'll go out first. Ibuki, you made all this. Luo Hong looked at the 4 or 5 dishes on the table, his eyes straightened. Did you graduate from New Oriental? It's good to cook, but why do you make it look so good? Ibuki's dishes are all set up, and they look better than the promotional photos that Luo Hong saw in restaurants before. Sit so well. Hearing Luo Hong's compliment, Ibuki, who was sitting on the sofa playing with a pen, raised his head and said with a smile, haha, thank you boss for your compliment. But since Ibuki showed his cooking skills in the newspaper, he has received more compliments. So there is already a clear immunity to these. After laughing, Ibuki lowered his head again, thinking about the interview goal of the first shrimp period. Alas, what a good employee who can't be humiliated. Luo Hong, who hasn't figured out the situation yet, has already set a mark for Ibuki in his heart. This dish made by Ibuki is not only good looking, but also delicious. Also, how did my appetite become so big? Could it be that the first came to the aftermath of One Piece? Luo Hong recalled Luffy and the gluttonous girl in the anime, a chill, I don't want to be like them. Although he thought so, within a few minutes, everything on the table, except the dinner plate, was eaten by Luo Hong. This. Forget it, don't change things like nature. After eating and drinking, Luo Hong also sat on the sofa and asked Xinqiang, who was sitting opposite, when will we receive the information after the release? It's the release amount, when will we know? Xinqiang thought for a while and said, others used to be in charge, but Boss Hans knows the process and he will send it directly to the retail point. We just need to go to Boss Hans's place to ask at night to find out. Oh? Is the printer here still packaged for sale? And such a good thing? However, Luo Hong is too lazy to care about these things. As long as they can sell them, they don't need to care too much. What matters is how the follow-up response will be. Boss, do you want to go out and have a look? Xinqiang saw Luo Hong's anxiety, so he suggested. Luo Hong nodded, this idea was in line with Luo Hong's mind, okay, let's go out and have a look. I'll go too, by the way, to see if the guys from the Bubble Island News have the news of the New World War. Ibuki listened after the conversation between the two, he also stood up and said. Okay, let's go together. Luo Hong didn't stop him. Anyway, there's nothing to do. It's okay for everyone to go together. After that, the three of them went straight out. Is there a retail store nearby? Luo Hong asked Xinqiang as soon as he walked to the street, thinking of this question. I'm not very familiar with this place, I don't know. Xinqiang said that he didn't live here, and he didn't know much about the conditions nearby. Then look for it first. If you can't find it, go to a place you know. Luo Hong decided to come up with the easiest way. Shingo and Ibuki didn't object either, okay. Regrettably, after the three of them walked around the villa area, they didn't see any place to sell anything. However, the navy patrolling here gave them 2 glances. Don't think of us as thieves. Ibuki said to Luo Hong, looking at a navy soldier who was staring at him not far ahead. Luo Hong was deeply speechless at the timidity of his opponents, and said, we are not real thieves, what are you afraid of? Let's go, there doesn't seem to be any here, let's go outside and have a look. In the end, it was Xinqiang who led Luo Hong to a place not far from his home and found a place where he could buy Shamboard newspapers. There are quite a lot of people today. Xinqiang looked at a stall not far ahead and said to Luo Hong. Are there not many people before? Luo Hong asked. Xinqiang shook his head and said, half less than this time. Is it because of his own novel? Luo Hong's eyes lit up. You reading www.yuyugonshu.com, is this popular? Let's go and have a look. After speaking, Luo Hong walked over quickly. Moriya and Kaido went to war. Isn't it written in the newspaper? Is the third emperor of the New World about to be born? Among the crowd, a big man with a round face said, sure, Moriya and Kaido are both famous great pirates in the New World, this time the winner will definitely be promoted to the emperor. The new emperor after Whitebeard and Bigamom. It turned out that they were discussing the battle between Kaido and Moriya. After Luo Hong walked, he realized that it was just an empty joy. Why is it not about the war? What is this? Novel. What's wrong with the Shamboard newspaper? It's completely inconsistent with the content above. A few people who bought the newspaper just happened to see the age of navigation below, and found that it had absolutely nothing to do with Kaido's battle with Mariah just now, and they were all anxious. Isn't this annoying? Fortunately, there are no pirates in this group of people, and no one is making trouble. Hey, there's Roger in it. One of them glanced at the content below and said in surprise. After hearing this, the round-faced man said, "Who? Roger? Roger One Piece?" The man said, "Well, it seems to be, but it's not about One Piece. I'll take a look at it first." "Oh? Would you like to see it again? Is it okay to write?" Of course, the big man with the round face wouldn't wait for the man to finish it. He raised his head and said to the stall owner, "Give me one too." UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Boss, there is hope. Xinqiang said excitedly to Luo Hong when he saw that this group of people had begun to pay attention to The Age of Navigation published together with the New World War. Luo Hong also heard the comments of these people, and like Xinqiang, he was very happy. But this can only mean that people are paying attention here. Whether it can have such an effect in the whole shampoo area, then only ask Hans in the evening to know. Although I haven't heard of these things written, the story is still pretty good. The round-faced man who had already obtained a copy of the Shampoo Diary Weekly, after reading The Great Voyage Age with only more than 10,000 words attentively, said, "Yeah, although I haven't heard of it, it looks interesting." Others agreed. They have never seen anything interesting in this, even if some legends and stories are too fragmented, such a complete story appears in the newspapers, which is relatively new to them. The boss is amazing, why didn't you find out before? Ibuki is also happy that the newspaper can get back on its feet, not because his big news has attracted readers. But Luo Hong's The Age of Navigation can arouse readers' interest. A big news can only be popular for a while, and a place that can attract readers for a long time is the basis for a newspaper to continue. This time, thanks to you, Ibuki. Luo Hong was not stingy with his praise. Indeed, if it wasn't for the big news of Ibuki's New World War this time, Luo Hong's novels would have taken people's attention. Without this news, perhaps these people would just read it carelessly and put down the newspaper of the Chambord newspaper. Gathering readers, it is estimated that it will take a long time. Ibuki wanted to smile embarrassedly, and said, "This time it's mainly luck, it's nothing." Luck is also one of the attributes. Luo Hong sighed. In his original world, the attribute of luck was never high. Luck attribute? What is this? Ibuki, who had no concept of games, couldn't understand Luo Hong's words. Luo Hong waved his hand and said, "It's nothing, let's go to the next place to see if it's the same everywhere." Luo Hong was still a little worried that this place was short-lived, so it would be good to know more about some places. After Luo Hong finished speaking, he asked Xinqiang to continue to take them to the surrounding retail outlets. After shopping for a few points, the response was not bad. After watching the news of Kaido vs. Mariah, they all noticed The Age of Navigation below. And the evaluation of it is not bad. The first step that Luo Hong expects is to go out. Let's go back to rest first, and go to Hans's place at night to see what's going on. Luo Hong is very happy, his efforts to stay up all night have not been in vain. In this way, the goal of standing on the heels of Chambord has been completed halfway. As long as these readers are willing to read it, the sales of the newspaper will not worry about it. Shingo and Ibuki are also quite happy. Even though the Chambord Weekly was relatively hot in the first 2 years, it was not as discussed as it is today. Now the boss, The Age of Navigation, brought the newspaper office that was on the verge of bankruptcy back to life. The day before yesterday, it was simply unimaginable. The three happily returned to Luo Hong's villa. Because there was still some time before the evening, they discussed the future development of the newspaper. "Boss, we can continue to publish your novels. I think it won't be long before the Bubble Island newspaper will be overtaken by us. After Ibuki sat down, he was the first to speak. In the words, he couldn't hide himself of joy. Luo Hong also smiled and said, "You only have this little ambition. What is this Bubble Island newspaper? In the future, our newspapers will be sold to the whole Great Route, and the new world will be read in the future. This reporter has become famous." After speaking, Luo Hong still didn't forget to make fun of Ibuki. Ibuki also smiled and rubbed his head. Luo Hong said he didn't dare to think about it. As long as the Chambord weekly newspaper could sell well on the Chambord Islands, he would be thankful. The newspaper office is done, and even if his job is preserved, he doesn't have to take the risk of running out of food to find work everywhere. Sitting next to Ibuki, Shingo patted his colleague on the shoulder and joked, "Ibuki would not be Ibuki at that time." "What is that?" Ibuki turned his head to look at Shingo, who was talking. Xinqiang chuckled lightly and said, "Haha, Ibuki was the great reporter at that time, haha. Maybe I will invite you to the Holy Land Mary Joa to be honored." Xinqiang said, clutching his stomach and laughing loudly. "Stand up." "Okay, Xinqiang, you also make fun of me." The boss Luo Hong didn't dare to do anything himself, but your kid is different. As Ibuki said that, he pressed Shingo firmly on the sofa. "Okay, the two of you, talk about the business." Luo Hong interrupted the two who were having fun and said sternly. When the two saw that Luo Hong had something to say, they also sat down and looked at Luo Hong. "I plan to put the age of navigation in all the newspapers in the future. Unless there is any big news, don't put any more news on it." Luo Hong stated his plan. Ibuki was the first to react. He is now a reporter for a newspaper, and he said just now that he wants to be a big reporter. "Why don't you want news now?" "Boss, you are not going to copy me." Although I said this, Ibuki felt that Luo Hong would not do this. He left himself and Xinqiang only 2 days ago. How could it be possible today? It's about to be laid off. How is this possible? Luo Hong waved to Ibuki, and said, "We have too few staff now, and we have to work overtime to get a layout. If you go out for interviews every day, you will have to recruit people. But you also know that what our newspaper office lacks the most is money, and it will take a long time to recruit people. Therefore, I plan to let you and Xinqiang work at home to get the operation of the newspaper office and contact the advertisements outside." Advertising. Ibuki heard a new term again. Luo Hong seemed to have already thought about his words, and said directly, "Just get a page for those restaurants, auction houses, amusement parks, etc. Why do you want to get a special page for them?" Ibuki said puzzled. "Won't you lose money?" Ibuki didn't react, but Shingo next to him thought of the business opportunity and said, "Is it going to collect money?" "Yes, Xinqiang is still smart." "Ibuki, you have to study hard with Xinqiang." Luo Hong smiled at Ibuki. "To collect money? Will these shops do this in our newspapers?" Although he was teased again, Ibuki, who was relatively strong in his heart, still asked his own question. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Just when Luo Hong and the three were discussing the future development direction of the newspaper in the villa, the Chambord Islands welcomed a person who would shock the entire sea in the future. On a pier in Chambord, the round-faced man who had read the newspaper before was chatting with the people beside him. "Let me tell you, that Roger led a large fleet of Ziliang, and in 2 days, they captured Chang'an, the holy land of the Han Kingdom. In Roger's fleet, there is the famous tiger of Ziliang, Lely, an armed physician. Kalax." As the big man was talking, a group of pirates who got off a pirate ship that had just docked stopped beside the big man with a round face. One of the men in a black cape asked the big man, "You mean Roger the Pirate King?" "Yeah, it's Roger," the Pirate King. The round-faced man might be an employee on the dock. He was used to seeing pirates docked, so he wasn't too afraid. Then what is the Ziliang fleet, the Tiger of Ziliang? The man in the cape continued to ask. Dahan took out a newspaper from behind him, pointed to the words on the title page, and said, "What kind of novel was just published in our Chambord weekly newspaper? The name seems to be called The Age of Voyage. These things I'm talking about are all it's above." The big man didn't bother to explain, so he handed the newspaper to the man in black. Since he'd read it himself anyway, it's okay to show it to him. "Bibo, didn't you say that the story just now was what you thought?" The colleague next to the big man quit his job, and feelings were fooling us just now? Baring Po suddenly thought of how he forgot about this, and smiled awkwardly. "Well, isn't that what I'm going to tell you? I'll lend you the newspaper later." In order to save his face, Beard Point had no choice but to smile. The man in black who took the newspaper was immersed in the newspaper at this time. "Although the writing is wrong, it is quite interesting. I bought your newspaper." After speaking, a fat man behind the man in black handed Beard 200 Baileys, and a group of people disappeared on the pier. Although Bibo is not afraid of pirates, it does not mean that he will chase after him and ask for his newspaper back, not to mention that the other party has returned the money. 120 Baileys Chambord Weekly, I have read it, and it sold for 200, which is not bad. "Bibo, didn't you say you loaned it to us?" After the pirates left, the person beside Bibo was furious. "It was fine for fooling us just now, but now they are fooling again. Hit him." Crackling. "Boss, it's almost time, let's go to Boss Hans first, shall we?" Xinqiang in the villa looked at the time and said to Luo Hong, who was still writing The Age of Navigation. Luo Hong raised his head, looked at the clock on the wall, and said, "How fast does it go? Let's go, anyway, my hand is sore." After speaking, Luo Hong also shook his right hand, but I haven't written so many words with a pen in years. "Hey, are you leaving?" Ibuki was leaning on the sofa, and when he heard the conversation between the two, he woke up faintly. He had always been used to interviewing outside, but he was a little unaccustomed to staying indoors for so long. "Well, let's go." This time Luo Hong knew how to go, so he took his head and went out. "This time I went out, and I was much happier than when I went to Hans to discuss printing 2 days ago." After all, in the morning, they had already witnessed the popularity of the Shamputi weekly newspaper, so everyone was in a better mood, and they simply went to the shops they passed by. "Wow, I've eaten senbei from this shop before, and it's delicious. I didn't expect to move here," and I said, "Why did it suddenly disappear?" The sharp-eyed Ibuki saw a shop selling senbei, and shouted loudly. Said. Xinqiang covered his forehead and said, "Don't make a fuss, kid. It's not normal for a store to move. Before, it was impossible to open a store in an illegal area. Who wouldn't want to come to number 4049 after making money? That's right, this place is much better than us." Ibuki nodded, expressing his approval of Shingo's statement. At least there were fewer gangsters and pirates who were noisy and fighting on the road. "Okay, the two of you, I'll treat you to a big meal after earning money." "Haha." Luo Hong put an arm around one person's shoulder and laughed. When Xinqiang and Ibuki heard Luo Hong's words, they laughed and said, "We knew that the boss would not treat us badly, haha." The three of them were chatting and laughing, and soon came to Hans's printing factory. "Yo, Luo Hong, here we go again, haha, the boss is waiting for you inside, hurry in." Before the three of them entered the door, Hachiko at the door saw Luo Hong and others who were approaching with a laugh. "Okay, then Hachiko, let's go in." Luo Hong was not polite. After signaling to Hachiko, he walked in. The ink smell of the printing factory is very strong, but fortunately, Hans's office is relatively far away, so the smell is slightly less. Dong dong. After Luo Hong walked to the door of Hans's office, he gently buttoned it twice. "Come in." Han's voice came from inside the room. Luo Hong opened the door lightly, and Shingo and Ibuki walked in as well. "It's Luo Hong, haha, your era of great sailing is really good, even I was fascinated by it, haha." Seeing that it was Luo Hong, Han stood up and walked over. Hearing Han's compliment, Luo Hong smiled and said, "This is also an opportunity given by Uncle Hans. Otherwise, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com, we have no hope of printing it out." Luo Hong is telling the truth. If Hans rejected Luo Hong that day, going to the next one, it is estimated that there is not much hope. At that time, Luo Hong would have to sell the villa to collect money and publish it. "Where are we? We have been working together for a long time, and we should do me a favor." Hans asked the three of them to sit on the sofa in the corner, put down 3 glasses of water, and then sat next to them. "I'll have someone settle the accounts for you later, it won't take long." Hans also knew that Luo Hong was short of money now, so he didn't beat around the bush. Hee. Luo Hong touched his head, feeling a little embarrassed. He just talked about money and made Luo Hong feel embarrassed. "Actually, it's okay to close several issues once, but now I really don't have any money in my hand. If Uncle Hans can close it one at a time, I'd be very grateful." Hans smiled and said, "Haha, it should be at this time. I have worked with old Roman for so many years, so I don't need to talk about such trivial matters." After speaking, Hans took a sip of water and continued, "Luo Hong, let me tell you something." "Ah? What?" Luo Hong was stunned. "Isn't this all over? Just give the money later." "Cough, that is, your future newspapers will also be brought to us." Hans smiled awkwardly and said, "It seems that this newspaper is really popular, and even Hans has started to have a relationship." But just like what Hans said, Luo Hong didn't think too much. Hans helped him a lot. "It's not a small thing to promise. Don't worry, Uncle Hans, I will definitely send it to you in the future." "Haha, then it's settled." Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. The weekly Shamboard is sold at 120 Baileys on the island. Because of this fire, it sold nearly 10,000 copies on the first day. 1,200,000 Baileys were divided into 5 accounts by both sides, and Luo Hong got 600,000 Baileys at one time. This was in the era of former boss Roman, but he didn't even dare to think about it, although he borrowed the east wind of the New World War. But it's a world of difference from when it sold thousands of copies a week ago. Shingo and Ibuki are more excited. Even if the newspaper office is really resurrected, the worst plan is to let go of looking for a job again. "Let's go, let's celebrate. Do you know which restaurant has good dishes?" Luo Hong, who had money in his hand, did not panic. With a huge sum of 600,000, Luo Hong was full of energy. Although this money is only 6,000 yuan at most compared to the previous world in terms of purchasing power, but the money earned by one's own ability should still be happy. "The restaurant near us seems to have been renovated. Although I haven't eaten there, it looks good. Would you like to go and have a look?" Ibuki suggested to the two at this time. Hearing what Ibuki said, Luo Hong didn't refuse, and said directly, "Okay, then go to the one you mentioned. It's not delicious, but your salary will be deducted, haha." "Ah? Then let's switch to another one, shall we?" Ibuki panicked, but he had never eaten at that restaurant, so I really don't know if it was good or not. Luo Hong smiled and said, "You kid, haha, let's go, you still believe this?" Ibuki used to live near number 13, Zheng and Luo Hong's villa and the printing factory formed a triangle, so the distance was similar. Compared with the lively number 40 and the orderly number 50 on the 13th, it is obviously much deserted here. Ordinary people rarely come to these places to eat, and as long as they can earn some money, they will move out of here immediately. The giant trees here are intertwined, and they complement the bubbles in the air, and they have some fairy tale flavors. Boss, that's it. Ibuki said to Luo Hong, pointing to a restaurant located in a protruding tree root. When Luo Hong saw the situation in this place, it seemed that he was familiar, but he didn't keep the memory of this body before. How did this feeling of déjà vu come from? But no matter what he is doing, go up to eat and say, let's go up. The restaurant from the ground to the restaurant is connected by a long staircase. When Luo Hong walked up, he was already out of breath. The physical strength of this body is really bad. Luo Hong patted his own chest, gasping for breath. Boss, are you all right? Xinqiang asked when Luo Hong felt uncomfortable. Luo Hong shook his head and said, it's okay, I'm just a little tired, let's continue. Alas, no wonder this guy fainted while running. But fortunately, otherwise, I wouldn't have a chance to come to this world, and I might be trapped by that big man. Hey? This. Luo Hong, who was slowing down, looked up at the signboard for the visit, with the words Xiaqi ripping off bar written on it. Isn't this the legendary Xiaqi blackmail bar? Ibuki. You are trying to trick people. Ibuki, forget it, let's find the next one, don't you see that this is not a bar? We are eating, so it's not appropriate to come here. Luo Hong backed away, we only had 600,000 in our hands Bailey, if you go in, you may not be able to come out. Ibuki didn't know why, so he said, ah? No, food is also sold here? I heard from those pirates in the past that the food here is pretty good. They want to trap you too. Don't, let's change, Xinqiang, find a family you are familiar with. Seeing that Ibuki was unreliable, Luo Hong hurriedly said to Xinqiang. But just when Xinqiang was about to speak, a person suddenly came out of the bar, and he was the famous ripping off Queen Xiaqi. Yo, there are guests coming? Why don't you hurry in and take a seat? Really, come and greet the guests. It's over, what should I do now? Even Rayleigh is there. If I run now, will I leave a bad impression? Got it. Go ahead, don't you owe some money then? Come on, let's go in. Luo Hong thought for a while, and finally made up his mind and took the two into the bar. Xiaqi, who welcomed the three of them into the bar, took out a cigarette from her pocket and lit it before saying, what do the guests want? Sake or rum? Ah? Just have some sake. Luo Hong originally if you don't want wine, you can't be used to drinking it, but after thinking about it, you are here to celebrate, so what if you don't drink some wine? Well, okay, do you need anything else? After the wine was settled, Xiaqi stood still and continued to ask Luo Hong. I don't want anything for now. Xiaqi squinted her eyes and continued, don't you order snacks? Drinking alone is not good. Then, do you have any good snacks? This money is definitely not enough. I think takoyaki is good. Xiaqi gave her advice. Luo Hong thought to himself that he had given up anyway, it doesn't matter if there is more, it's a big deal to leave a person to wash the dishes. This person, well, Ibuki is fine. Luo Hong, who was ready to betray Ibuki, said, let's get a stack of them, and the others won't be needed. Okay, I'm going to prepare now. Xiaqi nodded, Yu reading www.yuuganchu.com went to the back kitchen. Hey, Luo Hong wiped his forehead, knowing that he would be the only one who would be ripped off and still come together. Boss? What's wrong? Why did the boss feel wrong since he came up? Is it a problem with staying up late? Xinqiang asked worriedly. Luo Hong waved his hand and said, no, it's fine, I guess I'm hungry, just eat something. The sake you want. While Luo Hong and Xinqiang were still talking, Rayleigh, whom Xiaqi called just now, came to the table with 3 kegs. We can't have so many bars. Sankey, we are not Luffy's kind of foodies. I can eat it on that day. In the next few days, I am like ordinary people. Thinking of these, Luo Hong also looked at the legendary figure known as the right arm of One Piece. Just like the image in the comics, he wears glasses, has a top-down scar on his right eye, has a beard on his chin, and the long curly hair on his head is not completely white as in the plot, with some gold in it. It's all right, just keep it after drinking, the rest is not money. Although Rayleigh had a scar on his face, he spoke much softer than Xiaoqi. Luo Hong breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Hey, that's fine." "Ha ha ha, are you scared by the signboard?" Seeing Luo Hong's expression, Rayleigh laughed. "Xiaoqi sign, I don't know how much business it has ruined, it's obviously just ripping off the pirates, but it scares all the people around." "Ah? What's the sign?" Ibuki never paid attention to the sign or anything. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read.